Hello, I'm doing a book review, and the book I want to review is a book I actually read last month, but for some reason I haven't gotten around to reviewing it yet, but the book is Watchers by Dean Koontz. Now, Watchers was published in 1987, and many people consider this to be, from what I heard, many people consider this to be Dean Koontz's best book. And so far, I haven't read too many books by Dean Koontz. I've read Twilight Eyes, I read this book, and I read a novella by him called Strange Highways, which was published in his collection of novellas and short stories, Strange Highways, and I read two of the other stories in that book. But I haven't read too many books by him, but I will say that this was a really good book by him, and I can definitely see why fans of Dean Koontz would consider this to be his best book. But basically, Watchers is about a man named Travis Cornell, who, it turns out, a few years ago he actually served on the Delta Force. And but this guy, Travis Cornell, he has lived a pretty tragic life. Like, it turns out that a few years ago he was married, but basically his wife ended up dying of cancer, and it turns out that his mother actually died giving birth to him, and when he was 10 years old, he actually saw his brother drowned, and I forgot exactly how his father died, but basically this guy has lived a pretty tragic life, but what happens is, one night he's out hunting in the woods, and he comes across this dog, this golden retriever, and he notices how the dog is acting kind of strange around him, and it appears that the dog is actually being chased by something in the woods, and it appears that the dog is trying to get him out of the woods as well. Eventually, eventually him and the dog do get into his truck and they drive out of there. What happens is he eventually starts noticing that this dog appears to be smarter than most dogs, and he ends up deciding to keep the dog, and he ends up naming it Einstein. So what happens is eventually Travis and Einstein meet a woman named Nora. Now, this woman Nora basically is kind of a shut-in. Like, she never goes out, but basically Nora, it turns out that her aunt raised her, but her aunt kept her basically indoors, she basically kept her homeschooled and never let her go out, and basically because of that, Nora is now basically kind of a shut-in, but but what happens is Nora ends up getting a stalker, but I don't want to give too much away, but eventually Travis and Einstein, they actually save Nora from this stalker. And when eventually Nora and Travis actually develop a romantic relationship with each other, and they both start noticing how this dog Einstein is a lot smarter than regular dogs, and eventually they find out that Einstein actually has intelligence close to that of a human's intelligence. And what happens is they end up getting a Scrabble board, and basically they teach Einstein how to spell, and basically they communicate through the Scrabble board. Like, Einstein would spell out words and stuff. So they basically find out how to communicate with this dog and stuff, and basically they find out that this dog Einstein is actually an experiment. Basically, there was this experiment, this government project where they were trying to create an animal that had human intelligence, so they ended up creating Einstein. But they also find out that these scientists who created Einstein also created something else. They created this mutant monster who they called the Outsider. But what happens is basically Einstein and the Outsider ended up escaping from this facility that they were made in, and I forgot exactly, I think the place blew up or something, and that's how they escaped. But basically now Einstein, he basically has kind of a telekinetic link with this monster called the Outsider, and it turns out the Outsider is the thing that was pursuing Einstein in the woods that day when Travis met him, and basically the Outsider is trying to find Einstein so he can kill Einstein. But what happens is, at the same time that this monster is after them, there's also a psychotic hitman who's after them as well. Basically, there was this hitman who was hired by these people who wanted to kill the people behind this project, and basically this hitman eventually found out what that project was, and now this hitman wants to capture Einstein so he can make money off Einstein. But the thing about this hitman is, he is completely psychotic. Like, he actually believes, like, he is immortal. Like, this is all in his head, but in his mind, he actually believes that every person he kills, he takes their life force and basically becomes immortal from that. So now Nora, Einstein, and Travis have both a monster after them and a psychotic hitman after them, and at the same time the FBI is also after them as well, because the FBI knows about Einstein and stuff, and they want to get him too. So yeah, Watchers was, I thought, a very good book, and really most of the book focuses actually on the relationship between Travis, Nora, and Einstein, and the thing I liked about it is, yes, it has a premise that's basically a horror/science fiction premise, but it's almost a little bit more than that. It's almost like a drama, basically. But it was a very good book. I'm not sure if I would say this was... I almost want to say this was probably the best book I've read by Dean Koontz so far, but I will say in the middle of it, it seemed to get a little slow for me, but then it just picked back up, and so yeah, that's my review on Watchers by Dean Koontz. Very good book. I highly recommend it if you haven't read it, and bye.